Hey, everybody. I know that times like this aren't easy, and having questions that have eternal implications weighing on our hearts and our minds don't really help at these times. But I know there are questions about things like cremation and burial practices, things like that, that can really confuse a lot of people and just compound the stress that naturally, obviously, comes during these times. So I just wanted to give a few thoughts if that's okay. There's not a lot I know how to do in this world, but I'm pretty decent at studying the Bible. And I've actually studied some things like this because these are important issues. I'm recording today. So I figured if it's okay, I'll just share a few thoughts. So a lot of people ask whether cremation is okay for Christians. And some are told it's a sin. Some are told that it sort of interferes with the resurrection of the body. And so it has eternal implications. But honestly, the truth is the Bible doesn't forbid creation. It just doesn't. Most of the objections people have come more from tradition or denominations and their teachings than from scripture itself. Just to give you a little ancient context, burial was the norm in ancient Israel and in early Christianity, but that was a cultural thing. It wasn't a commandment. Bible never says thou shalt not cremate or thou shalt bury. And God never ties resurrection to how well our bodies are preserved, right? Ancients believed that somewhere below us, down below the surface of the earth, there was a sort of a realm of the dead. And so they believed it was a physical realm under the earth. There wasn't a whole lot of hope for those who passed away, which is why in the Old Testament, especially, you'll see an emphasis on living a long and blessed life, right? Passing on your name, your lineage, your seed for many generations to come. Life after death wasn't really a positive thing. So ancients wanted to maximize the present life and then sort of leave a legacy that lived on after them. And really until around Jesus's time, and then especially among early Jews and Christians and in the New Testament period, this was the prevailing view. This is when life after death really began to be understood as a more hopeful thing. But before that, it just wasn't. But hold that thought. So, in terms of opposition to cremation, views who oppose it, honestly, the loudest opposition to cremation comes from more rigid and more dogmatic corners of the Christian world. So, groups that kind of treat theological issues in really black and white ways, even when scripture isn't clear, like this issue. So that's why you're going to find really strong opinions on the subject if you search for it online, and they'll sound really convincing. Even though when you start to break it down, the arguments just really don't work. They're full of bad ideas. So be careful what you listen to out there, please. But these are often the same traditions that oppose things like organ donation based on this really narrow and rigid misunderstanding of the body's role at resurrection, at the final resurrection, right? This is usually among really fundamentalist group. Some older branches of Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy have some strong stances historically on these issues, not necessarily today as much, but these are not typically views that are found in or built on good study of scripture, right? Which is really all that matters. Now, some of the deeper roots of cremation hesitancy, I'd call it, especially in Jewish traditions that kind of helped shape or influence early Christian thought up until like, 1,000 years ago. These ideas come from the belief about bones being preserved for the resurrection. Okay, so certain strands of Jewish thought believed that a small bone at the base of the spine, which is actually called the lutz, would serve as the starting point for how God would rebuild the body. So it's not found in the Bible, but it's built on a tradition. And it shows kind of how seriously early Jews, especially, treated the body at burial. This became a rabbinic law. It became kind of codified in Jewish belief systems. You'll find it in Orthodox and conservative circles of Judaism today who prohibit cremation. Not all more progressive Jewish groups prohibit it any longer. But bottom line, God doesn't need a body to be intact to raise it. The Bible makes it clear. Genesis 3:19, we're told that we return to dust. Revelation 20:13, even the sea gives up those who have died. God knows how to find the pieces of the body and the body to make it new if he needs to. 1 Corinthians 15, Paul explains that the resurrection body is not just reanimated as a corpse, it's completely transformed. It's a glorified body. It's sown in weakness and it's raised in power. It's sown a natural body, Paul says, and it's raised this spiritual type of body. Different issue. So we're not talking about God putting back bones together. We're talking about a new creation. The same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead will raise us too, Paul says in Romans 8. And creation doesn't affect the soul either. So Paul himself says in 2 Corinthians 5:8 that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Philippians 1:23 says that to depart this life is to be with Christ, which is far better, Paul says. And so your inner person, he calls it, is already in God's presence when we pass away. Cremation doesn't change any of that at all. And this is maybe another different issue, but when Jesus tells the thief on the cross next to him that today you'll be in paradise, this is kind of a morbid example, but the thief's body was not likely to be buried. It was going to be thrown out and essentially cleaned up until it was gone by wild animals and birds. Okay? Jesus still promises that the thief will be in paradise today. I don't ever claim to be an authority or the only authority on anything, but I can say that according to scripture, which is really all that matters when it comes to opinions about important issues, according to scripture, cremation isn't a sin. It doesn't interfere with God's resurrection of our bodies. It doesn't hurt the soul. It's a personal decision, a familial decision, sometimes shaped by finances, space, conscience, ecology, whatever it is, whatever the family situation. Burial is fine according to scripture. Cremation is fine according to scripture. God's promises aren't fragile. God's power isn't dependent on human actions about our loved ones who've passed away. It's dependent on the fact that he brought the universe into existence, that he crafted humans literally to be his physical bodies on earth, the physical image or statue of him in the world, living out his promises, and that there ain't nothing in heaven or earth that can stop him from welcoming us into his presence when we die, and then from raising us and recreating us in bodily form, and ultimately reuniting our souls and our bodies at the resurrection, just like he did Jesus in the spring of 29 AD. Man, it was awesome. You should have been there. So at this point, we can grieve while we grieve. We can bury the way we need to bury, and we can hold on to the hope that that same unstoppable God, he knows how and is fully able to raise us to life with him and with each other forever. And by the way, after our visit with Bon with Jerry a couple of weeks ago, Andy asked him about his favorite vacations that he and Granby used to take. And he thought about it, and he said, I'd say cruises, because she didn't get seasick like a lot of people. And I'm going to say right now that as we speak and as we mourn, Granby and Bonpa, they're setting sail on the most beautiful cruise he or she had ever taken in this world. And it'll be fun to chat with all of those who've gone before us someday. And they can show us the ropes, just like they've done during their time here on earth.